This week's episode of the And She Looked Up podcast is brought to you by Fine Lime Illustrations. If you love quirky, colorful art transformed into fun, handmade stationery items, pretty much guaranteed to brighten somebody's day, that's just what you'll find in my new online shop at finelimeillustrations.com. That's fine as in I'm fine, lime as in the fruit, illustrations.com. Browse the entire collection or sign up for my email list to see some behind-the-scenes peeks into my studio. You'll also get first notice of new product launches and subscriber-only sales. And as an added little bonus, you'll also receive a free coloring sheet to help you relax and de-stress from your day. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another new episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I am your host, Melissa, and today I am here with Heather Travis. Hello, Heather.
Hello, friends. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. For those of you who, I can't remember if I've introduced you properly in the last few episodes we've done, so it's probably time for a little reintroduction into who Heather is. So for those of you who are relatively new to the podcast, Heather joins me once a month to chat about the business of being creative and about our own creative businesses. She is a painter and she is also a PR professional. So we combine those two things to talk about art and business and creativity and business and marketing and all that good stuff. Heather, why don't you tell them a little bit about the kinds of things that you paint? Because you are working on a big project right now.
Yes, I'm working on my first solo exhibition, which I know we're going to talk about at a later date, but I paint primarily large-scale art. I love using bright, bold, happy colors, hot pink, bright yellow. Those are two of my favorites and appear on almost every canvas I've ever thrown out the door. But I also, if it and it being like quite literally anything, if it can be painted, I love to paint it. So I do custom painted denim. I love painting furniture. I happily paint murals and paint walls. I paint my toes. I paint all things. I love painting. Like if it can be spray painted or chalk painted, or I'm all over it. I just like color. I'm like you, Melissa.
That's
color.
our uniting force there.
Yes.
Spreading color throughout
color,
the world.
color in your wardrobe, color in your home, color everywhere.
Spreading the message of color. Yeah.
Yes. Even fun. I'll tell you, this is such a random aside, but I use Melissa's fabulous calendar stickers for my bullet journal, and there was a month without your stickers because I just was lazy in placing an order and I wanted to wait for your Christmas cards. And anyway, I'll tell you, it was a really sad month without your colorful stickers in my notebook. Even though I used colorful marker, your stickers just made all the difference.
Oh, thank you. You know, what's funny is this year I created 2 sets of planner stickers that were in pastel shades because I do love a lovely pastel every now and then. One was kind of lilacs and the other was peaches and creams. And I used those for the first couple months of the year. And as much as I love them, they're super pretty. I was like, nope, I need my bright rainbows back.
Back to my rainbows. Back to my
So
rainbows.
I went back, but yeah. So yes, you have an exhibition coming up this year, and if you all listening ever want to see somebody paint all the things, you need to follow Heather on her Instagram account at Heather Travis, because she paints all the time on there.
All the things.
All the things.
I paint all the things all the
Yes.
time.
She just spray painted a table this weekend.
If I could paint my husband and my dog on occasion, I would. Yeah.
So today, Heather and I are having a little year-end check-in, because by the time this airs, it's going to be the middle of November, and we are getting to that point in the year where we start thinking about what we've done this year and what we're going to do next year, and thinking about how we're going to work our way through the holiday season, which is here.
Here. And so I think this is where you always catch me, like whenever we're talking holiday, I am just starting to think holiday, and it's because I have already received Melissa's holiday card order that you've already produced, promoted, and even sent out. Like, you're so on the holiday game. It's impressive. I wish I could be more like Melissa on that. But I do, because every time I'm like, oh, I should really think about that.
I think because one of the things I sell is boxed holiday cards, and people send those out. Like, that's not something people buy in December.
No.
Like, if I'm putting them out in December, I'm too late. And just when you have to factor in shipping. Which is, much better than it has been the last 2 years, but is still a little wonky. Yeah, most people like to have, if you're sending Christmas cards overseas and stuff, people still like to get those out the door in November, which means they need to have my cards in October, which means I have to be selling them in September.
Yes. Holy
Reverse
moly.
engineering.
Yes.
But I have a few other Christmas things that I'm working on that are not out yet, so I'm not quite as organized, but what has this year been all about for you? I'm going to switch this around because we do this. We have this episode every year, but I'm going to ask you this year, what is the thing that you are most proud of in your business this year?
I think I'm most proud of the putting myself out there that I did in my application for my grant that I was awarded, which then translated to the subject matter for my solo exhibition. I have, and I think I've said it multiple times on the podcast, I have always said, I just paint happy art. And there's nothing more deep and meaningful. It's just happy art. And I finally realized, and maybe it's part of like checking my privilege as a white cisgendered woman who's had huge amounts of privilege in her life, I realized that I have a platform and I can make really happy art that has more to it. And so that realization and going through that process, I think is going to take my art and my creative process and the business of my art further because of that. So it's a big year. Year. And I didn't even see a therapist to come to that conclusion, which is like, I feel pretty proud that I came to that on my own. Yeah.
Well, it's a big shift for you. And do you think you would have gotten there if you hadn't been asked to do this exhibition?
So I have been thinking, that's a great question. And I have been thinking about that. The exhibition, no, it was the grant process for the exhibition. So I was given the opportunity for the exhibition. I had ideas, sure. But I was thinking of it more as a collective of paintings, nothing more. Mm-hmm. And then when I had to put the grant proposal together, that forced me, like I had to be one of those super hoity-toity anal artsy people saying, what I see with the green is a vision of jealousy. And, like I had to be that person, or I had to sort of pull a layer back and say, Heather, you have to expose yourself more in order to say, give me this money, like I deserve this money.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I pulled that layer back and exposed myself, so to speak, uh, it then, but I'll tell you, it, because I was forced to do that, I have never been so inspired in my entire life. Like I am producing like crazy right now. And that's been amazing. Like I don't want to say I didn't have direction or purpose before with my art. I just painted happy things. Now I have direction and purpose, and I'm painting happy things that mean something, and it's crazy exciting. So, yeah, it's been it's I think the big thing was a mind shift. That for me was the big thing, the great thing, the awesome thing for me.
That's really interesting because I think there's a lot. It's interesting that it was going through the grant process and
Hmm.
asking for money that
Yes.
triggered that, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there who would be very nervous about bringing money into the equation
Hmm.
and allowing that to influence what they create.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of interesting layers there.
Oh, big time. And I'll say, like, the biggest thing for me that the money allows is the freedom to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as all creatives, we cannot underestimate the value that play has, right? Like for you, just sitting down and doodling can yield incredible results, but
Mm-hmm.
also is just mindfulness, playfulness,
Mm-hmm.
relaxation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those, anyway, be having that, yeah, I'm totally with you. It was such a momentous shift in my brain that I truly, and like tracking it back to that grant process. I'm sitting at the exact desk in the exact same position, staring at the screen right now that I was in April, pulling it together,
Mm-hmm.
which is a long time ago, but that was, yeah, anyway, pretty, it was a mindset shift, which is just so crazy to think about.
Yeah. Do you think if you had decided to self-finance that you would have made this same shift?
Ooh, good question.
Or would it? I mean, there's different ways you could go with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
would do you think you would have got there eventually? Maybe not with this exhibition, but maybe
I
through something
I
else.
don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. And
coulda,
I
shoulda,
think
woulda.
well, and funny enough, I mean, because it's a really big space to fill, immediately budget wise, if I didn't get the funds, I would have been looking to existing paintings that I hadn't sold and figuring out how I could work those in. Funny enough, it's like when you move into an apartment and you're like, well, I have this basement couch from my nana, so let's use it. And I mean, not to compare, not to compare my paintings to basement couches from your nana, but
Do you
I would have
recover it? Do you reupholster it?
exactly like
Yeah.
I would have tried to sort of like zhuzh it up and make it fit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I feel I have the privilege of saying this doesn't fit. I can make something
Yes,
new.
you don't have to pull out your bedazzler.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I love a good bedazzling though. Love a good with a popped collar denim jacket.
Are they
Oh,
still a thing? Are bedazzlers still a thing? They were so popular for a while there, weren't they?
people listening, let us know. Is bedazzling in or not? This is the burning question, Melissa, and I want to know.
I think it's
And
been replaced by the Cricut.
oh, that's true.
I think it has. Now we cut out vinyl and
Yes,
felt and things and stick it on stuff. So
that's
it'll be
very true.
interesting to see
Yeah.
where crickets are in a few years.
Yeah, that's very true. And so for you, Melissa,
Mm.
what would you say your greatest moment, happiness, opportunity, achievement?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me this year. So this is my first full year of being 100%. I don't want to say self-employed because I've been self-employed for
Yes.
12 years, but up until November of last year, I owned another business with a business partner.
Yeah.
I was paid a salary in that business up until last year.
Yeah.
And
Now it's all Melissa all the time.
yeah, so I really felt like I was starting over from scratch. So
Hmm.
the first half of this year was really about getting some infrastructure in place. Like I launched 2 websites this year, which is a lot.
Oh, that's a lot. Yep.
And I did it in the first 6 months of the year, 7 months of the year. And just a lot of other things in behind the scenes, just systems and client processes and really, really boring stuff. Like, I'm sorry, it just is, but it's so
I
necessary.
was gonna say those are the foundations, right? Like that, if you're
Yeah.
starting over, having those processes. And so funny enough, you and I talked about it, and I brought this up in a session I workshopped locally here recently, but we brought it up in our branding episode. And in terms of like brand touch points, your processes, like how somebody interacts with your business, that's a brand touch point. And if you
Yeah.
don't have your shit straight, those Christmas cards that I bought could have been a really disappointing experience instead of a easy, smooth,
Yeah.
delightful
Yeah.
experience.
And the
Yeah.
bulk of my business is creative services, not my artwork.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, I think if you listen long enough, you know that I'm a graphic designer, and I'm also a writer. So those are the 2 things that I make the bulk of my income from. And there's a lot of client back and forth
Hmm.
on those 2 things. And so it's been a long time since I've done that degree of client work, and just
Hmm.
getting back into, yeah, just good systems to make their journey easy, to make my
Hmm.
journey easy, all that stuff. So I'm just I still feel like I have a very long way to go with all of that, but I feel like I got some really big chunks of that and accomplished this year. And so basically around the middle to end of August, I kind of realized, because I had been working on all those things in the background, I had neglected my showing up publicly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's been a little bit more of my focus this last half of the year, is to kind of get back on social media, start posting more frequently,
Hmm.
and all of those types of things.
That leads me to a really, actually, a question for you, because
Mhm.
I think about it frequently, and I know you've thought about it because you just said it. When you're doing sort of the boring behind the scenes stuff, you don't post about it. You don't show up online. And
Mm.
I'm the same way. I feel like if I'm just doing some stuff, that there's like nothing to say to the world. And I'm so curious how other creatives deal with that, because I feel like our socials are like we show up when there's
People want to
something.
see the pretty art.
Yeah.
I think
And
people
when,
do like the behind the scenes. Like, I know,
yeah,
but a very specific component of the behind the scenes. They like
exactly.
seeing us. They like seeing us drawing or painting or crocheting or whatever it is that we
Hmm.
make. They like seeing the making process, and I
Hmm.
think a lot of people like seeing the packing process. I know, like,
Yep.
packing vlogs on YouTube are super popular.
Yep.
People create reels of them. Like, people like to see the pretty packages being made.
Yep.
But when it comes to, like, here's my Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly.
This is me importing products in from Etsy over to Shopify. This is
Honestly.
this
Yes.
is
Like,
how I create a rate card.
yes. Ugh.
Like, yeah, okay, not interesting.
Honestly, like yesterday, because I'll try and do, like, I've thought, okay, so I'm cleaning my studio. I'll set up my phone, I'll take a time lapse, and I'll just post it to some fun music, because it's like behind the scenes, but
Mhm.
whatever. But yesterday I was wrapping some packages, and honestly, all I thought was if there was just video footage of my super awkward grunting noises, trying to make this tape stick and getting dog hair, getting it unstuck out of the tape, so there wasn't like so much dog hair in the package that I'm sending this person who's paid good money for it. Like, it was so not glamorous and
Mhm.
so not.
But I think people probably would have enjoyed that. Like,
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. Anyway, I just
But I think it's hard to show up particularly consistently when consistently you're doing the not so interesting things.
it is, and I think also there's a component, a level of confidentiality that you don't want. Like,
True.
here's my Excel spreadsheet. I don't want you to see what's in the spreadsheet, but
Exactly.
or here's my rate card, but I don't want my rate card on the internet, or
Hmm.
things like that, or here's a product listing on Shopify where you can see my costing and everything.
Yeah.
Like, so I think there's that too. I mean, there's certainly ways to hide that, but being a small business owner is, we say this all the time. It's not glamorous. It's not sexy. The stuff you see on Instagram is definitely the more fun side of what we do. So so I'm really pleased with the fact that I've built a lot of foundation this last year, and like I said, I still have a ways to go, but I feel like I got some good building blocks done. It was super, I will be very upfront, it was very frustrating going through that because I felt like I wasn't creating anything new. I felt like I wasn't making any money because I was so focused on these other things. And as those of you listening know, we've dropped the podcast down to every other week this season because now I actually need to make some money. And so I really had to shift my time in terms of getting actual client work done and doing other things. So this is an interesting question for you and for me. One of the things I really struggle with in my business, it may be the thing I struggle with more than anything except bookkeeping. And that is creating for the business. So I have a whole bunch of projects that I need to do. And I do mean need, not want to do. So one of the things that I have been working on for like a full year now is a short ebook. And it is essentially written, but now I have to design it. And this is going to be an ebook that serves a couple of purposes. It will be for sale on my website, but it is also something that every new client who hires me to create ebooks for them will get as part of their package working with me. It's a smart book. Yeah, it's a book on how to market your ebook.
Yeah, smart.
And so, it serves a couple of purposes. It has the potential to be a revenue generator, but it's also a key marketing component that adds value to my client, right? But here's the part where I'm stuck. The part where I'm stuck is now I have to create an ebook for myself. And I love doing ebook design. It's one of my favorite things to do. That's why I do it for clients. And yet I'm sitting there going, no, you have other things, like you should be doing client work. You should be doing paid work, because the designing part of it is the fun part.
Yes.
So I keep pushing it to the side, because I shouldn't be wasting my time on fun things. And I do this all the time. Like one of the other things that I need to do this year is a key piece of my revenue, hopefully for next year, is creating templates, ebook templates that people can buy who don't want to go through a custom design process with me, and honestly, sit down, Melissa, and this is what you do for a living. Why is this so hard?
And that's such a fascinating, because
so much resistance to it. So much.
That's such a fascinating form of procrastination, because
ridiculous.
You're just and Melissa, honestly, I am the queen of procrastination. Because if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. But for you, and that's what's really that's so interesting. That's a really interesting hurdle. You maybe just have to somehow figure out that once you get over that hurdle, you will be making money. You can't make money on that ebook unless it's actually out there. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's so many things that you can sit there and just be like, are you resisting this because you what's your money resistance? Yes. What is your and it's so silly. Whereas the actual writing of the ebook, which I do a lot of work as a writer, but because this is not fiction or something, this is that wasn't hard for me to do. I just sat down and did it, because it as easily, writing comes easily for me, but it's not necessarily the thing I enjoy doing the most. I do enjoy it, but not on the same level as making an ebook. Right. And so, I wrote the thing. It's written. It's been written for months. I've given it to people to read as beta readers. But actually designing the part that I really enjoy is the part that I'm just stuck at. And it's It's like that with anything for me. Anytime it requires me, and not if it's something super small, like I can make little social media graphics for myself and stuff, because I can do that literally in 3 to 5 minutes for a graphic. So big deal, right? But a big juicy project like creating something like this, and it's just so that's where I am a little bit stuck right now.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Honestly, Melissa, that is so fascinating. I'm trying to think of examples of where, like, because I mean, when I get stuck, it's so obvious why I'm stuck. Like you know, people told me I was bad at math. I've internalized it, and so doing the books, of course, I bump it to Friday afternoon because I fucking hate it. But yeah, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Now I'll tell you, I have not sat down to read a book. I used to be a voracious reader and read. I could read like a book every 2 or 3 days. I haven't read a book in probably 3 years because I think of that as such gratuitous
It's decadence.
Time.
Reading
It
a
is
book
so
is
decadent.
fiction. Reading a fiction book is complete decadence, because
It's complete decadence.
and I'm the same way.
And literally I think to myself, okay, I think of painting as also decadence, but it's an opportunity to make money decadence. And so I'll think to myself, well, if I have 2 hours, I could use that time better in my studio to do more, make more. And I still get, like, it's not everything that I would have gotten out of the reading, the relaxation, the mind time, all of it. I still get out of painting. So it's a really weird thing, though. I'm totally with you.
It is weird because, you know, if I sit down to draw or doodle or something, that I would say about 50% of the time when I sit down to draw, I'm doing it with the express purpose of creating something to sell. And the other 50% of the time, it's just because I just like to doodle. It's just my natural. If you put a pen in my hand, that is what I will start to do. Yeah. Right. So, and I very rarely have resistance around that, even though I'm creating stuff to sell. But I think part of it is because the design process for me is very different from the drawing process or the illustration process. Like design, the process of designing an ebook or even designing a logo, like a big project, is messy because it takes usually several iterations. Like super interesting. So I had been working on this project for a client. We've worked together before, and we were working on her second book that we had done together, and she wanted to go in a slightly different direction. So we had created a template that I was for her to sign off on, and then I was going to, you know, fill in the book for. And then she had to take a bit of a hiatus over the summer, so we put the project on hold, and we restarted it again at the end of August. And I opened up this project that I hadn't looked at in a couple of months. And I was just like, wow, we can't do this. Like, I'm just like, that bothers me. You know? And so I went through, and they were things that had kind of bothered me a little bit before, but she was happy and they were good enough, right?
Yeah.
But now I had just had that much distance from it that I was able to pull back, look at it and go, and I knew how to fix them. I think because it had been in the back of my head, like I knew how to fix them. And so I went through and I made the changes and updated it, and I showed it to her, and she was quite happy with the changes, and I am much happier looking at the book now. But this is what I mean by it's a messy process in that, and so I think maybe there's a little bit of resistance there on my part, because I know this is going to sound a little conceited and arrogant, and I don't mean it to, but I think when as a kid things come relatively easy to you, particularly school and that kind of stuff. That as you get older, you expect that to follow you through. Right?
Yes.
You know, and so I think sometimes if I'm not able to come up with something that I love within that 3 to 5, that's why social media graphics are so perfect. I can do a social media graphic.
I know exactly what you're about to say, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, so that social media graphic, I can put it together in 3 minutes, and it was easy, and it's like, wow, okay, yeah, I'm awesome. And then when I'm working on a bigger project, it is not easy. as much as I love it, it's not easy. It doesn't come together quickly. And so then you hit that frustration point where you're just like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. Like, and then you're like, nobody's ever going to hire me. And you question all your life decisions. And, you're basically ready to go get a job working anywhere but where you're at.
Yes.
Right. And so I think maybe that's where some of the resistance comes from, is it's just like, I love doing it, but I know it's going to be messy, and I know I'm going to have times where I'm going to be really fed up with it and frustrated, and it's not going to be done in 3 to 5 minutes and look good.
Yes. And that, I'm really guilty of that. And Brian will say to me, it's obvious you rushed. It's obvious you rushed. And I'll say, I know, I just wanted to get it fucking done. Because it literally, I'm like, it's either getting done now and at 90%, or it's never getting done. Or it's going to sit at 50% with its, and I have, like, I'm looking at the back of a canvas right now. It's sitting at 50%, and it has been sitting at 50% for 2 solid years with its back turned to me.
Yeah.
And
mocking you.
Exactly. With its back turned and its middle fingers exchanged, like just going, aha. Because I couldn't get what was in my brain was not going onto the canvas. And I got frustrated, and I was like, that's it. I'm done with you.
Yeah. And I think when what's in your brain you can't get that out, that usually, for me anyway, means that I'm struggling with a specific skill. And I'm just not practiced enough at it yet to get it out. Like, there's definitely things I can get out now that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I could not have done, because I just didn't have the skill set.
Yes.
And so I think that also adds some resistance, because it's like, well, now I need to spend the time growing that skill. Well, that's going to take a lot of time where I'm not making money, and I really need money right now because, I have to have dental surgery.
Yes.
Right? So...
Yes. And I agree, funny enough, like when I turn that canvas away from me saying, oh, and I'm done with you, part of it is the frustration that what I want to do is not coming quickly. But I'm totally with you that part of that frustration is probably recognition that my skills aren't up to snuff. And that's where I'm like, I get frustrated.
Yeah.
I am totally with you.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yes. So
yeah. Yes.
So yeah, that's where I've been stuck this year. So there's definitely been some good things this year that I'm super pleased with, and I feel like I have definitely started to get this new business in a good place.
Yeah.
I'm happy about, and the way things are going, I should make more money than last year, which is also a good thing, but I'm not at a point where I'm earning enough to sustain myself properly.
Right. But you put the systems in place so that hopefully next year you can just
I can focus more on the work.
Yes.
And the thing with systems, for everybody listening, is that they're never finished.
No.
You're always tweaking them and improving them, and that's the way it should be, right? Especially as the world around us changes. So that'll still be a process. I think, though, and this was the thing that I was going to mention earlier, but I lost it in my brain. But I think what going through this process has done for me, and that I am quite pleased with for myself, is I have really had to embrace the better done than perfect.
Yes.
And if I was waiting on perfection, neither of those websites would be up to date. Like, particularly the one that I sell through, where actual transactions take place. I think there was so many components I wanted to add to that website, and like Shopify apps and things, so that I could have reviews on the site, and so that I could
you can add those though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But I was kind of in this little mindset where it's like, well, it's not ready until all those things are on. And it's like, Melissa, you don't need them for people to buy stuff.
Yeah.
And I got the site up at the end of July, beginning of August, and I had my best September.
Amazing.
Art-wise, illustration-wise. September is always my busiest month, because that's when my cards are available for pre-order, and they're one of my most expensive items. So it's always my best month. But this year was like by far my best month.
Yay!
out of all
Yay.
my Septembers that I've had. And so, if I had faffed about
Yes.
trying to get, a review app on and if you like this, then you'll buy that app on there, all of things which probably could have, increased my sales even more. But if I had waited, I wouldn't have gotten any of those sales.
Yes.
So, yes. So I'm really pleased with myself because that's a hard thing for me to do.
I think that's a hard thing for any creative.
I think it is.
We
And
have a
it's
vision of how it's going to be, right?
and it's always easier to tell other people. Just get it out
yes.
there. Better,
Yes.
better done than
Yes.
perfect. It's always easier to tell somebody else. It's far harder to do it for yourself. So
Totally. And it's funny enough, on occasion when I have, when Brian will say to me, it's obvious you rushed it. And I'm like, well, then you go ahead and do it. You go ahead and do it. You get it to this point. And I can guarantee you, even if he took all the time in the world, it would get to 50% of what my 90% was.
Mhm.
So I think that's the thing. I constantly, whenever I think to myself, it's not perfect, it's somebody else's perfect. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
it is somebody else's perfect.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
you, like, as for a website, like, are the items visible? Is the price clearly marked? Can they
Yeah,
go through
that's
the
all you
transaction?
need, Melissa.
Like, can
I
they
had to
go
keep
through the
telling
transaction?
myself.
Exactly.
They need to see the thing. They
Yeah.
need to know how much it costs, and they need a way to give you their credit card.
Exactly.
Like,
That's it.
That's
That's it.
That's basic retail.
Yes. And that's the, but like every time I'll think to myself, I'm like, is this the same font I used on another? And I'm like, oh, who cares if my font, like, yes, I care if my fonts are consistent. And yes, I will go back and make sure. But
Mhm.
does it make the difference between selling a painting or not selling a painting if I have 12-point font on my events page?
I mean, it will to
13
some
point.
people. There will
Right?
be some people and go, "Wow, her website's a hot mess." Not
Yeah.
that yours is not a hot mess, but there will be that one or two people. But the people who won't notice are far
Exactly.
greater than the
Yes.
people who will.
And you can always go back. I mean, you can
Yeah.
always go back. I think that's the thing, particularly for so much of what we put out there. Like, you can always go back and tweak it. Not a finished, I mean, even funny enough, a finished painting, like
Oh, for sure. So
finished piece of work. Like, you could even, if you've printed through all of your Christmas cards, you could add a charm bracelet to Miss Doodle's wrist, and the next iteration has this subtle change that nobody else. Do you know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, on my Shopify site, when I put all the products up there, none of them had costs in them. They just had the retails, which is all the customer needs to see. Customer doesn't need to know the cost.
Yeah.
But for my reporting down the road,
Yes.
having costs in there makes it easy for me to see what my profit was and,
Yeah.
am I making money kind of thing. And I didn't put costs in because I just didn't have time to sit down and
Yep.
I had
But
over
you can go
100
back and
products.
add those
Yes,
in.
so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of weeks is whenever I have a few moments.
Yeah.
I have some costing spreadsheets where from this product selling course that I took, that one of the best things they gave us was these costing spreadsheets in Excel. That it's a total formula for figuring out how much your product costs to make. And it includes everything. Like, it's not just the cost of the materials, but it's your
Right.
time, it's the packaging, and it's waste. They have a formula for calculating waste at each step, which I was a little skeptical about when I was first doing it. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, that seems like a lot. But then I started tracking my waste, and I'm like, actually, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So, and that was a big part of the puzzle I was missing. So anyway, so I calculate the cost for each product and stuff. But so I'm just going back through and adding those in as I can and where I can. And I also estimated weights on some of the things, which was probably not a smart thing at the time because it does impact my shipping costs. But I'm fixing those as I go along and stuff. So, and I just noticed on the weekend, a customer bought 2 prints. And I didn't realize that I had the print set as a digital product and not a physical product. And she didn't.
Yep.
She thought she was ordering a physical product, so it was no
Yep.
big deal. But it didn't calculate any shipping. So, unfortunately, what she paid for shipping didn't require any additional shipping.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
mistake. But so what? I fixed it, and
Dude, I had the exact
Move
same
on.
thing. Funny enough, I launched digital downloads and I was like, whatever, I'm just going to put them out there. Like, it's a digital download, whatever. And I put it out there and I realized, whoops, tax wasn't included. And then, okay, so now I need to change that. And then the first customer to buy is like a dear friend. And I'm like, tell me how the process went. She's like, I haven't gotten my file to download it yet. And I was like, huh, okay, let's figure out what went wrong. But it wasn't panic and there was no anger. Nobody was upset at me. And I got it solved 4 minutes later and lickety split. Everybody's happy. Like nobody, my making it 90% and saying that's good enough didn't impact anybody negatively.
No. I mean, a couple weeks after I launched my site, a customer messaged me and said, I've been trying to pay with my credit card and it keeps telling me that the transaction can't be completed. And I was like, well, that's really weird, right? And so I went in and it turned out I still had the site set on test mode for credit card. So everybody else had just been paying with PayPal.
Yeah.
And nobody had told me. And, you know, if she hadn't said something, it would still be said.
And that's not, and I think for anybody listening,
but she was
if
totally
you encounter
nice about it. Yeah.
and that's exactly, just if you encounter something, assume the person doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And just sending them a note, letting them know nicely.
Oh yeah, I fixed it.
Is
she purchased,
so
and
appreciated. Yes, and it's so appreciated. Like
yes.
it really...
it was. I told her many times. Like thank
yes,
you.
exactly. Like thank you, and it's so appreciated when people like, hey Heather, did you notice? And they're like, like it's the spinach in my teeth. Hey, random stranger, did you know you have spinach in your teeth? Oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me. Like. Oh, and so I had a question for you for the remainder of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Have you set, because, and this is back on the social media track and sort of stepping away and now coming back, have you set yourself any goals for the next, say, to get you to Christmas in terms of social media and showing up, or are you just easing your way back into it? Whatever feels
easing my way back into it. All the work going on behind the scenes wasn't the only reason I wasn't super active on social media. I just find it a very challenging place to be. And actually last night I wound up having a conversation with a friend. I did not know about this whole Kanye situation, and I started seeing all this stuff in my feed that was very vague. Like, you know, I stand with my Jewish friends, and I'm part Jewish, which I don't talk about very much because I wasn't raised that way, but I am part Jewish. So I was like, what, you know, like, what's going on? And a friend told me about it. So then I had to go down a rabbit hole last night. Like, what is...
And aren't you glad you did, Melissa?
I know. And then it's just like, wow, this is why I hate social media, because it's just, I don't know. I have so many mixed feelings about it. And being Ukrainian and having the whole Ukrainian war unfold on social media, like, it's tough because... like, I feel like I should stand up and say more, but at the same time, I don't even know how I feel beyond the fact that I feel angry and sad.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to be articulate about it.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who are so much better at it than me. And then I'm like, well, is saying something better than not saying something? And it just becomes very, particularly the Jewish side, because I wasn't raised Jewish. My mom was not raised Jewish from a religious perspective. Like, I don't, but... you know, from an ancestral perspective, which to people who are anti-Semitic matters just as much as whether you're religiously Jewish. I am part Jewish. So I sort of feel like if I talk about it, I'm talking about something I don't know very much about, but yet at the same time, it does impact me. So it's just a weird situation to be in, and it all just makes me very sad.
Yes. Sad. You know, it's funny. I've been having such a real debate on the social media thing. I mean, we talked about this before, but I cut back. I got rid of my Facebook. So really, I'm Instagram and LinkedIn, and then TikTok, really just for fun. But I've sort of had to put myself like in a little. I did an essay in university, funny enough, on the fallacy that ostriches do not, in fact, put their heads in the sand. It just looks like they do. But be the ostrich in the sand and sort of put my head in the hole and be like, nope, I'm just sticking my head in my little happy side of the rainbow, and I'm just going to focus on being me. And I can't read about death and destruction and hear about all of these things. so there's like that side of me, and then there's the other side of me who's like, Heather, how can you be an active participant in the world if you put your head in a hole and sort of ignore these things? And
But the thing is, sorry to interrupt,
no,
I feel like the thing is, you can be an active participant in the world without doing it on social media.
and so that's exactly where I've kind of narrowed it out, is that it was election day in Ontario. I had very vocal conversations with a lot of my neighbors about voting, who they were voting for, why they're voting, like had very candid conversations. Did you know what I heard about this school board trustee? She believes that, trans children don't have the same right. And people were shocked and I'm like, yeah, and I'm telling you that because you're my neighbor and you need to hear this stuff that's happening in our community that are going to impact. And funny enough, I was saying this to a lot of parents, and they were like, wow, I didn't know that this was going to impact my children. So I have those conversations in person, and then I use my social, which is a much more broad audience, to focus on the things that are, for like, selfishly Heather. It's all Heather. It has to do with Heather.
Yeah, I think.
You know what I mean?
Well, the other thing with social media is that it's an echo chamber. The
Yeah.
people who are following you and listening to you, they're already generally
Exactly.
speaking on the same page as you.
Yeah.
And if they're not following you. They stop.
Exactly.
I mean, we all do that, right? Like,
Yep.
this person's full of garbage. I'm
Yes.
out.
Yep.
Right? And if you do stick around, it's usually because you want to troll that person.
Yeah.
So you're not interested in having your
Exactly.
your mindset changed. You're just there to hassle them.
Yeah.
So, and you see a lot of these posts. We did it with Black Lives Matter. Everybody posted the black square until all of a sudden the black community pointed out that you're taking up space
Yes.
for us. Like, you're not thinking it through. And then
Yep.
yesterday, seeing all these posts about I stand with my Jewish friends. I mean, I was sitting there and I'm like, but what does that mean?
Exactly.
First of all, I had no idea what anybody was talking about because I just haven't watched the news in a few days.
Yeah.
And secondly, like what does that mean? You put it up on your social media page. That doesn't mean anything. It's very performative.
Yes.
And this is what I don't like about social media. I find it very performative.
Yes.
And it's just talking the talk. It's not walking the walk.
No kidding. And so funny enough, that's what I've tried. And that is part of my goal for moving forward. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently, is that when I see stuff on social media that is encouraging action, I am going to take offline action. So if it's the day where it's, I don't know,
an election. Don't talk about voting on social media. Get off your butt and go vote.
And go and talk to your neighbors and make sure take your elderly neighbor and go and vote. Like, be a physical change. Social media is not action. It can incite action.
Yes, it can.
It can fuel action.
I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about this stuff on social media.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying, like, you have to ask yourself when you post this stuff, what am I doing besides this?
Yeah. And like putting your money where your mouth is, right? And so did everybody who posted about going to vote actually vote? And so for me, that was my big thing, is that I am not putting my head in the sand. It might optically look like it because, as I refer to it, as my social media is my side of the rainbow. Welcome to my side of the rainbow, right? And so I control the dialogue on my side of the rainbow, but my side of the rainbow is much broader than my social media presence. And so that's what I need to keep reminding myself, is that those actions that I take offline are so impactful and so important. And they fuel what goes online. And that's a big one for me moving forward, funny enough. And that interestingly ties to what we started just to circle our conversation around so nicely, Melissa. What we started the conversation with was, the stripping of the layers and being more vulnerable and putting out the stuff for my exhibition. This kind of goes along with that, is just being more me and accountable to me for being me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does. It's it's interesting because we started this conversation. It was meant to be this episode was meant to be sort of like a check-in, like a year-end check-in. We do like a goal episode every year, and so that's what this is going to be. But I think it kind of turned into like a whole episode on resistance, really, which I think is really interesting. Whether it's resistance to putting yourself out there, or resistance to social media, or resistance to following the crowd. Like, there's, interesting.
Yes. Yes. So that is totally fascinating. Yes. But I think I think this year has been a really interesting one for a lot of people because we sort of are like, are we out of the pandemic? Are we still in the pandemic? What's
Nobody
happening?
knows. I know.
Right. And then like world politics, like the UK's got its like 17th prime minister in the past 4 days. Like there's elections happening all over North America right now. Like there's elections happening in the US, there's elections happening all over Canada. Like, and people are
And these
just,
are the important elections too. Like they're particular.
yeah,
Speaking about Canada anyway, but your municipal elections are the
it's
most
huge.
important elections you can vote in because that's where the money gets
Yeah.
spent. So
Yep.
pay attention to that.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So actually, go out there and vote.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh my gosh.
and I did take my dad to vote on our municipal elections were last weekend.
Right.
So yes, and I did take my dad to vote. So there you
Yeah.
go.
It's anyway. And yes. So I think this year has been an interesting one because I think it's
It's
like kind of, we've been shaken off the dust of being, I don't
it's
know.
so interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot the last couple of weeks. There's that old adage that if you forget history, you're destined to repeat it.
Yes.
And honestly, I feel like we're back in the early 1920s, I feel like we're back in the 1920s. Similar thing. We had a pandemic
Yep.
at the end of World War One, and that impacted everything. Then there's like the whole, hey, we're coming out of the pandemic, and we had the Roaring Twenties and everything. And then in the background in
Yes.
Europe was all
Yes.
this crazy crap going on.
Yes.
That's very similar. Anti-Semitism, far right-wing politics or far left-wing politics, depending on who you're talking about, and appeasement.
Yep.
Let's not forget how big appeasement was in the 1930s, which is
Yep.
kind of what's going on with Russia right now. We're appeasing them.
Yeah.
And then these huge movements going on with women in Iran, and which is monumental, quite
Yep.
frankly.
Yes.
But then you start hearing how Iran is also providing Russia with weapons
Yep.
in Ukraine, and it's all just like we're getting signals that we're on our way to a recession, which was what happened in the 1930s, and
Yep.
that's when I feel like what's happening right now is very similar to what happened in that mid-war period between World War One and World War Two, and we're not paying attention.
No,
that didn't go well.
and I'll tell you categorically, as a person who owns a retail store, the recession isn't coming. The recession is already here.
It is already here. I think anybody who sells product has I certainly see it in my Etsy groups and some other product groups I'm in. Everybody's like, where? And it's interesting because being a little bit older than a lot of the people in those groups, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s when
Yes.
my parents had a 13%
I was going to say,
rate.
exactly, right?
Like 3%, 5%, like gimme.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of there's a lot of younger millennials and Gen Z who've never experienced a world that was like that. And the recession of 2008 really didn't impact us in the same way in Canada that it did in the US. And even then, it wasn't on the same level.
No, and not for the same. And this is going to be a lot longer. And there's a lot of people who are literally going to lose their shirts, and a lot of people who with like very poor. Anyway, we could go on.
I know you're watching stock markets drop, and there's all these things going on. But it is so interesting to see all these people like, it's October. I don't understand why I haven't had any sales. And I just feel like saying, like, have you turned on a television or looked at a news site or anything?
Honestly, a girlfriend of mine, she has a variable mortgage rate. Her mortgage payment with the changes has gone up $700 a month. You find an extra $700 a month,
like,
and continue to do all the things that you were going to do.
Right? This is it. And I think there's just a very, and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to eat this month because nobody's buying anything. It's like, yeah, because they're in the same boat as you. They don't have any money to. And I think as creatives, one of the things we have to be very aware of is that what we create is a want and not a need.
Yes.
Right? What we create doesn't feed people. It doesn't house people. It doesn't clothe them. It doesn't get them to their work every day.
Yeah.
It might get them there in slightly better style or something. Yes. But at the end of the day, Or, if we make gourmet chocolates, we might
Yeah.
feed them. But yeah, I mean, just take a trip to the grocery store. If you can't figure out why people aren't buying,
Yes.
then you must be in a very good position yourself.
Yes. And so funny enough that and maybe as we lead up to the holiday season, it might be a little late by the time this episode airs, but that in terms of sort of putting my money where my mouth is and really, I mean, I've always railed against Amazon and all of those things, but I particularly for Christmas, like I really recognize how much a $20 sale means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know what my Christmas budget is, and I'm going to make that work over small businesses and creatives.
Mm-hmm.
And all, like, Amazon's not going to get a penny of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that other people, like, we are all exactly as you said, we're creating things that are a want, not a need. And so when I think the best time to support other creatives is when you need support the most.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And I do think that creatives are generally pretty good at supporting other creatives. But,
yes.
But in order for us to price our work correctly so that we actually do make some profit. So that we can eat.
Yeah.
That it's hard to explain the value of it to somebody who is like, you know what, I had to put a pack of bacon back on the shelf because I couldn't afford it, or a carton of eggs on the shelf because I couldn't afford it. So it's a different situation.
Like, if I feel so funny saying this, there's enough shit in the world, and guess what I make? Stuff.
It's hard. I know it's hard to justify what we do sometimes. I totally get that. But there is a place for art in the world.
Totally.
Art brings joy. Art brings thoughtfulness. Art, there's and so funny enough, even back to my bullet journal, like having your stickers. It doesn't, like, my bullet journal worked perfectly fine without those stickers. Okay. I knew what day of the week it was. I knew what I was doing. I knew exactly where to go. But I'll tell you the joy that they bring to looking in my bullet journal. Mm-hmm. And actually using it. For me,
truly, like, to actually using it, to wanting it open on my desk. Like, it's a visual delight with those stickers. And so, yes, it's a want, but it's like a want that my soul needs.
I think,
it's
perfectly okay to have wants. We're human beings, right? That's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's just that, there are certain times in your life where you have to regulate your wants a little more rigorously than other times in your life. Yes. And I think that's important. And I think it's also, you and I are old enough to have had grandparents who lived through the Great Depression.
Yes.
And I think it's fair to say that neither of us, despite the fact that we are a bit older than, say, a millennial or a Gen Z, I think it's fair to say that never in our lives have we experienced a recession on that level. Like, we've been through some recessions, but not on the level. And, but we saw how our grandparents behaved as our grandparents. Like, I don't know about you, but like my grandma could do anything with anything.
Yeah.
She could turn anything into anything.
Oh my God. Honestly, if youth is wasted on the youth. If I could have both of my grandmothers in my studio every friggin' Saturday for the rest of my life, to pick their brains and have conversations, I would eat it up, because they are the most truly, like, Heather, how did you learn how to DIY? That's like, DIY is our grandma's generation.
Yeah.
Like,
gardening
they did everything.
That's my grandmother. Like,
yes.
She taught my dad. My dad taught me.
You want your pants hemmed? You want pierogies? Oh my goodness, yes. You want, like,
my granny, not my grandma, but my granny, who I didn't know too well. She died when I was 11 or 12, and she lived in England, so we didn't see her very often. But she used to wear those Dr. Scholl's clogs.
Yes.
Do you know the ones I mean?
Yep.
So she had 3 pairs, and they were on rotation. There was the pair that she wore out, there was the pair that she wore in the house, and there was the pair that she wore in the garden. So the out ones were the best ones.
Yep.
And then when they were relegated to not being good enough for out, they became the house ones. And then when they went to the garden.
Yep.
I mean, she did that for a year.
Yep.
It's like, it is the one characteristic I remember of her more than anything is those clogs. Like,
Oh yeah. And like, and that's honestly, it's that generation. I wrote an essay in first year university on the difference between my life at 18 and my baba, my Polish grandmother's life at 18, and where we had been in the 5 years prior. And that, funny enough, and I started at the beginning talking about, first off, the privilege of just being white in society, plus the privilege that I had growing up with money, which is not the privilege that my grandmother had. And the life that I have is because of her hard work and all of the sacrifices and all of the things, but sometimes that wasn't very obvious. And I think the older I get, one, there's less giving a fuck about other people's opinions of me or what I do. And I think, and I channel my baba, funny enough. I said to a lady at the grocery store the other day, literally my shoe made a noise that sounded like a fart. And I was like, that was my shoe. It wasn't me. And she kind of looked at me and I said, as my baba used to say, I'm 77 years old. If I want to fart at the grocery store, I can fart at the grocery store. And she would just like literally do it with a smile on her face and be like, yep, you heard that right. Like, right.
I don't think I can go that far.
I couldn't go that far, but it truly, like, I aspire to live my life more like that and just be truly like authentically me and put myself out there. And if you don't like it, then that's, your loss, not my loss. And I'll just keep moving on. And that my actions are important and the way I treat my neighbors is important. Anyway, all those things, but those particularly those women and like their thrifty ways.
I don't know. There's always lessons from everything we go through in life, and
yes,
sometimes they're really hard lessons to learn. But, and just when I like the life I have today is the result of very hard work by other people.
Oh, ditto.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting how this episode really morphed from, talking about our goals for the year or like how we did with our goals. Yeah. So I don't know if we'll do an actual goal episode now, but it's interesting how this morphed into really talking about some bigger themes. So yeah, you never know where it's going to go when Heather's on the show.
That's my new tagline.
It rhymes even. Look at that. So anything you want to add before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. I think my conclusion is that I hope everybody takes a moment to think about where they are. It's, almost the end of the year. What are you grateful for? What were the opportunities that came your way? And what can you do to make more good things and more opportunities come your way in the next year?
Yeah.
Like don't dwell on what you didn't do.
Yes. I also think it's important to sit yourself down and look at all your numbers for the year. We didn't get into that in this episode. It is something I'll be doing with my mastermind group in December. We do that every year. We sit down and we go through our numbers and how we did with our actual goals and where we pivoted and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a good review process to go through because you really realize how much you actually did do.
Yes.
Even if you don't think you did a lot in the year, you probably did far more than you think you did. And you probably got a lot further ahead than you think you did.
Yes.
So it's a really worthwhile exercise, both for seeing where you can improve, but also seeing like, hey, man.
Yeah. High five yourself.
That was pretty awesome this year.
Exactly. As Barney Stinson says, self-five.
Self-five. All right. Heather, where can people find you online?
You can find my website, Heather Lynn Travis, and that's Lynn, Lynne, Heather Lynn Travis, or you can find me on Instagram at Heather Travis.
There we go. And I think that is it for this week. So thank you everybody for listening. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another brand new episode. Woo-hoo. And we will talk to you all then.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshelookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.